Justice Thursdays. And today, we will be having a conversation about tax tribunals. The Honourable Eric Nyongesa Wafula is already in the studio with us this morning. And as we get into that conversation, before we welcome him, let's hear today's proverb from Djibouti.
Yes. Clouds do not always mean rain, but smoke is a sure sign of fire.
Clouds do not always mean rain, but smoke is a sure sign of fire. The Honourable Eric Nyongesa Wafula, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. You're in the hot seat. It's Justice Thursday, and here you are with us. We are very excited because, and maybe you will take those clouds and rain on our excitement because it might be the total opposite of what we're talking about today. But I want to hear what you think about that proverb from Djibouti.
It talks about some issues that are very certain and others that have greater perception. And when you see clouds, there's a perception there could be rain. It doesn't follow necessarily because there are many other factors that could drift away the clouds. But for smoke, obviously it has a very certain source.
It is sure that there was fire. Yes. The Tax Appeals Tribunal and its role in facilitating access to justice. Now, you know, in the last few weeks, we've been hearing about higher taxes. So everybody's thinking, he's come to tell us how we can come and say that we are not happy with these taxes. And how then do we now start to look for some recourse? That's what's top and front and center. Is that anything different from what the Tax Tribunal really does?
Unfortunately, in terms of the conversation that has been going on, we have a very little role in it. And we may not have an opinion on which direction it ought to take. As a tax appeals tribunal, one of the issues we do is to await for formulation of a tax law and implement it. And our role is basically to ensure that there's equity in the manner that law is enforced.
So, what kind of laws are we talking about? Or what have we seen that we can now say, okay, this is one example of what may have been formulated after it has become policy, is when now people will then be able to come and say, well, we're not really happy with this, and then can we appeal it? Some examples of those.
One of the things that we need to appreciate is that we have various tax statutes. You know, we are looking all the way from pay as you earn, income tax. You are looking at matters dealing with customs. So what happens is that once a statute is in place, then there are issues of tax demands.
What's a statute?
A statute is a piece of legislation passed by Parliament.
What does it do?
What happens is that Parliament stipulates some law to govern a particular set of facts or situation. So in this particular situation, when it comes to matters tax, what happens is Parliament formulates some rules and regulations to govern collection of tax. So there are various statutes that govern the nature of taxes that will be imposed on Kenya.
So this statute is the framework?
It creates a legal framework.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, as you were saying, so what are some of the examples where we see that some of these have actually become law, have become policy, that then Kenyans, anybody can now, what process would they follow to come and now say, actually, you know what, I'm not really satisfied with this? How then does the tribunal operate to say, okay, let's hear you out? Do you have independent petitioners? An individual can come out and say, we're not happy with this for the good of Kenyans as a whole? How does that exactly work?
There are two parameters when you are looking at your question. One is that our role as a tribunal is very restricted in terms of whether you have a displeasure with a particular tax law. If you are not happy with that tax law, you remember when we had a minimum tax and 1% at one time, and 5, 3. If you are not happy with that situation, for instance, if you are a lobbyist, then your forum will not be the tribunal. Your forum will be the High Court, where you can be able to challenge the legality or constitutionality of that particular statute. For us, we only come in when the Kenya Revenue Authority has visited you and has come and said you owe us taxes, let's say you've not been paying, you have been earning, you're a farmer. We can see from the records you just sold 100 bags of maize.
Yes.
And you've not paid us anything. You have not given to Caesar what belonged to Caesar. You kept all the money
For yourself, yes.
So that's when now, when the revenue authority has visited you then and tells you we need 30,000 from you. That's now when you can come back to us and tell us, yes, I've been visited by the revenue authority, but I don't think I owe them 30,000. I also didn't perform that activity. Actually never sold any maize. I'm not even a farmer. So then our role will be to determine whether actually, one, you earned any income and whether that income yielded to any tax.
Okay. Now, when the tribunal, so how often does or do we have an ever sitting or ever present tribunal, or does the tribunal wait until it has, you've collected a number of appeals that come to your desk, or is it constantly sitting, rolling sittings?
This tribunal came into force in 2015, and we literally sit on a day-to-day basis. In fact, currently it's the largest tribunal. It's a 21-member tribunal.
Wow.
And that tells you how many appeals we deal with regularly. So there are many tax disputes. We literally having a minimum of about 5 to 7 appeals filed per day.
Wow. And what is if we can, what is the nature of these appeals? Is it based on the example that you've given? Maybe the taxman comes and says you owe a certain amount because of what you've sold, and this is what you must pay. Because if they have it in the books, the assumption really is that they know what they're doing. If they come and say this is the number that you owe, you should be paying, and then I come to the tribunal and say, actually, you know what? This doesn't make really much sense to me. How does the process then play out? Must I have gone through some kind of communication with the tax body? And if we then do not get to any kind of consensus, I can now come to the tribunal and then lay my claim.
Thank you. I think that puts it in a real perspective. Like the name suggests, you find that it's called a tax appeals tribunal. So which means it's an appeal from a decision. So what will ordinarily happen is that the revenue authority will serve you with a tax assessment or demand. The revenue authority will have made up a decision that there's a tax you have not paid. Or you declared, like you have an online declaration, everybody has an iTax. Your employer possibly didn't even remit payee. So there'll be a demand on the employer to remit payee.
Is it a demand on the employer or demand on you?
The demand is on the employer. For instance, there's a demand on the employer that you've been deducting and you've not been remitting. So once the revenue authority determines that there is a tax not paid, they will ordinarily send you either an assessment or a demand to pay. So once you've received that demand or assessment from the revenue authority, then ordinarily under the law, you have 30 days to respond to the revenue authority and tell them, I either owe this tax and give me time to pay, or because of the certain reasons, this tax never became payable. So if you are objecting to that, then the revenue authority has 60 days to respond to you and tell you, we have considered your reasons, it's true this tax is not payable, or having looked at your circumstances, let's say if you are a trader, you've been trading for a while, you have your books of accounts, the tax is on your benefits, profits. So if you never made a profit, you're in loss situation. So you may find that there may be no tax due and payable. But after looking at your books of accounts, they realize that they have audited you, they realize that you actually have been in gain, in profit.
You've had profit, yes.
You've made some profits, but you failed to declare and pay some taxes. So after they've reviewed, then they say, okay, fine, we have looked at your 3 years, we realize that 1 year, yes, you paid your tax and you're okay. But this particular year, we are not happy. Then you as a taxpayer, if you're not happy with the decision of the revenue authority then, that they are insisting on this tax, but my position still remains that tax is not payable, then you come to the tribunal. So the tribunal's role then there is to determine, one, whether there's any tax payable. And our role is to ensure that if there's any tax payable, you should pay. And you should not pay one tax more than you ought to pay. 1 shilling more, 1 shilling less of what you ought to pay.
You know, the thing that I've always found puzzling, I
Yes.
speak as a person who has received some of those notices,
Yes.
is you are in paid employment and you've been in that employment for a number of years.
Yes.
There's something called a P9 form, which your employer
Yes.
every year, this is what shows how they have deducted this money.
Yes.
And then you make your tax returns.
yes.
But when you get a notice, because that, and the notice is actually quite rude. What they're actually telling you, yes, it's a demand notice, so it's rude.
Yes.
It's not, you're given a little clause for perhaps a rebuttal at the end, but the import of that whole message is not meant to be conversational. It's supposed to be, excuse me, you owe us this amount of money, pay. Okay, or in case you think you shouldn't pay, then you do this.
Yes.
Kenya Revenue Authority would know that you are employed. And if you have a salary, it is deducted at source. So,
Yes.
under what circumstances then would the money not be deducted from you at source so that you owe? And is it you who should receive the notice, or is it the employer who, by virtue of your employment, not only deducts the money, but there's a history of that deduction having taken place?
You see,
And
by the,
evidence of the same.
you
Yes.
see, by the time you get a P9 form from your employer, your employer is actually certifying that this is my employee. This is the salary he's been getting. We've made these deductions, and we've remitted the pay. But what happens is that other than being an employee, many other times you will also have done one transaction here and there. And these days, you know, when you do any transaction, everybody asks for your PIN.
Yes.
And you are forgotten. So when you find that they're writing to you, if you are a person who is in permanent employment and you have no other business, is that there's some revenue somewhere that has been flagged out in the system that you didn't know, because your PIN is used all over. So you may find that you did some transaction somewhere and you got some little money, which you have not said. When they look at your P9 form, they can see from your P9, they can see all the payment from employer was received. But outside that, there is also some other revenue over and above your salary. Your salary is 250,000. And then it shows in your account some 300,000 hit your account. And there's this 50,000 you didn't declare, whether it was a gift or anything. So you see, you can explain. You can say, okay, I'm the treasurer in church.
Yes.
So occasionally during this function, or I had a funeral, I was fundraising. So you can give an explanation. So all they are, when they write to you, is that they have flagged out some payment which you have not declared. So it's now given an opportunity
For you to respond in
to
those
now
30
respond
days.
and say, I'm a treasurer in church, so I'm the most trusted man in the village, so I always fundraise for everybody.
I actually understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So see, you have an opportunity to explain.
Yes, you do. But remember, but when they make these claims, they're very detailed, by the way.
Yes.
They actually tell you during this period and this period, and they document it for you and they segment it for you very, very, very nicely.
Yes.
So that now you see, my query here is,
Yes.
if your only source of income is just that,
Yes.
and yet somewhere along the line it is felt you did not quite indicate what it is that you earn. And by the way, when they make that demand, it's a huge lump sum. Don't think it's a small amount of money. It's a sort of thing that can give you a heart attack.
It's based on figures they have seen.
And the assumption that you still have that lump sum for you to pay immediately.
No, they give you a time in which to pay. The question I'm really asking is,
Yes.
even if it is that they have evidence, all right, beyond the notice and beyond you responding in writing, okay,
Yes.
why is it that they never put it in writing for you to have an opportunity to actually have a discussion? Because sometimes you may need to document,
Yes.
but you may also need to ask and say, excuse me, folks, this is the situation. Can we have a little discussion about this, and so that I get clarity? Or must everything be written down in order for you to actually get a reprieve or to get an understanding? Is it not possible to have a discussion before you actually even write?
I think the Revenue Authority has come a long way. Lately, I'm sure if for those people in business, we tell you many times, in fact, before they receive the demand, they receive phone calls. And someone says, we've seen this in your account. Do you have time? We'll come and we discuss. And when they write to you, for instance, you have 30 days to give a response. So within the 30 days, based on your response, they may ask for you some documentation. They may also ask you for a meeting. So there are many meetings that actually ordinarily happen. So depending on the amounts.
Do not mention any meeting whatsoever.
It's based on your response that now triggers other issues, because you may respond and they say, okay, fine, we've seen your response, but can you support it with some documents? And sometimes you may not have documents, and you can also suggest some of these I may not have all the documents, but if I came and explained to you, you may understand.
So
and they'll give you that opportunity.
Okay.
Yes.
So then, Honorable Wafula, at what point does the tribunal then come in? Because here we are talking about access to justice.
Yes.
And I think, and stop me if I'm wrong, but oftentimes when we talk about access to justice, it's access to justice for everybody, individual and communal, right?
Yes, that's true.
So, at what point does the tribunal then step in to say that, okay, or at what point do I come to the tribunal? This communication has come to me, I've written back, we still are not in agreement. The authority says, no, actually, you have to pay this money. What would say me coming to you? Am I coming to the tribunal to say, now, can you mediate between the two of us? Can you hear out my case and now say that I actually don't owe them any money? Or will you actually say that I then now owe the authority money? How then does all of this now come to a head?
Yes, thank you. What happened is, now at the instance where you've now engaged the revenue authority after you've received the demand, ordinarily your engagement should be within 60 days under the law. So within the 60 days, the revenue authority still makes a decision that, because after they've given you the demand, after the engagement, the revenue authority is obligated to now give you what we call an objection decision. A decision that says, in spite of having listened to you, we've made a decision that this tax ought to be paid.
Okay.
So once you've received that decision insisting that you need to pay, then for you to avoid, the revenue authority then can come and for them, before they enforce that payment, you have a window of 30 days. Now to come to the tribunal and tell them, we have had this engagement, there was this dispute, tax dispute, we've had an engagement with the revenue authority, we have not reached a conclusion. So now you as a tribunal, you have to make a decision between us and the revenue authority on who is right. So you realize that the tribunal is one of the products of the 2010 constitution. Before then, the revenue authority was the one listening to you and making a determination.
Yes,
so now you have an independent arbiter here who will now make a decision on whether the revenue authority is right or not, whether that tax is payable or not.
Okay.
Or whether sometimes the revenue authority need to reconsider.
Okay.
Where you'll say, for instance, when I went there, I was sick. I was not able to give them all these documents. Now I have them. Can you send me back? They look at them.
What? Go ahead.
No. What the fine gentleman is saying, he's mollycoddling it. Let me read you a notice that I received so that you understand what I'm saying. Okay? Please be informed, dear taxpayer, my name is mentioned. Please be informed that you are required to pay the outstanding amount of a huge amount of money, as mentioned in the issuance of a 14 days demand notice, immediately from the date of issuance of notice, and they write the date. Okay? Now, when you look at the letter and the day in which you receive it, there's a lapse. The date of the letter and the day you actually receive it, there's a lapse of something like around 7 days. Okay? So already 7 days have gone and you've got a 17-day notice. Okay?
14 day.
Yes. Failure to which recovery will immediately be instituted without any further issuance. Okay? Your reference number of issuance of 14 days notice is this. Please find the issuance of 14 days notice attached now. That is the letter. Now you tell me, when you're given that notice, this room for the 2 months, the discussion, the whatever that you're saying, where is it?
If by the time you receive that demand, it means there was a previous demand before. Because what happens with the initial demand, which most times people miss it out, because many times they serve it on your iTax. So, and see, most of us, everybody has an iTax platform.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we all fail to do is that we don't regularly go there to see whether there's any
demand. They send it to your email.
So sometimes they'll send you an email or they post it on the iTax platform.
No. Why do I have an email? And why is it that even when I make my returns, I get an email communication? So why then suddenly do we have this option of it could be on an iTax platform or it could be on your email? The normal mode of communication is my email. That is why they have it.
But most time they will send you an email. But what will happen, either you may have missed out the email, because the first one, normally, what they will do is that when they serve you the very first time, they will tell you, we have determined that there's this tax payable. Kindly make arrangements to pay, or if you're opposed to it, let's know. And like you said, at the very bottom, after they have all made all that demand, at the very bottom, they always tell you, please, if you're opposed to this assessment, kindly lodge a notice of objection within the next 30 days.
Okay.
Yes. And the 30 days normally in law are supposed to be with effect from the date that notice hits your email. So if you come to us, for instance, and say, but I never received this initial assessment, then the issue will be at the Revenue Authority, when did you effect the notice? When did it actually hit the email? Other than the date that is that is written
on record, yes.
When is it that you actually brought to the attention of the taxpayer?
Okay.
Yeah.
So prickly situations, Honorable Wafula, and so the tribunal. Where does the tribunal sit, and then who then is able to access the tribunal, and at what frequency?
Thank you. The tribunal sits in Nairobi. We are based at Commercial Business Center in Upper Hill. And it's accessible to every taxpayer who has any dispute with the Kenya Revenue Authority. In fact, we have a standard filing fee of 20,000 irrespective of the amounts that the tax dispute amount is involved. So it's a statutory fee where you pay once, and for whatever processes that will be at the tribunal, we don't ask you for any other money.
Okay, so I'm coming to dispute something that has been put against me by the authority. So I come and I lodge this payment with the tribunal, and then the whole case is carried out regardless of what the outcome will be, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you have, so anybody who has an issue across the country essentially would have to come to Nairobi? Do you have representation county-wise?
Okay, what has happened is that we started in Nairobi from 2015. There have been plans to have satellites for registries for the tribunal across the country. But when you're thinking of setting up satellite offices, you also have to look at the number of disputes that you get. Ordinarily, what happens is that the Kenya Revenue Authority is big in certain regions. You may find that they're in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nyeri, Eldoret.
The former provincial
headquarters. So many of the demands will be coming from those head offices. And what has happened is that looking at the nature of the disputes that actually come to the tribunal, they are not largely those small disputes. Many times those small disputes are sorted out when the taxpayer approaches the Revenue Authority. So you find that by the time the dispute comes to the tribunal, the Revenue Authority has what they call independent review authority. It's a department that reviews now those objections before they come. So you find that most of those disputes, by the time it has originated at the branch office in Mombasa, by the time it escalates to the tribunal, it has actually been finally determined at the headquarters of KRA. So you find that they mostly escalate from the headquarters to the tribunal.
Okay.
So you find that because most of the tax consultants engaged who come before the tribunal, the lawyers and tax consultants, majority of them, actually 99% of them, are based in Nairobi.
Okay.
So when at one time you wanted to roll it out, then you realize that you'll be carrying this same tax consultant to do the matters in those regions. So you'll even be enhancing the costs to the payer, the taxpayer. But you see also what has happened from 2010 is that 90% of our matters are done online. So we have an online platform. We'll send you a link. So we'll listen to you from wherever you are.
From wherever you are.
Yeah.
So in terms of time, what does the timeline look like? Okay, so we've been through this whole song and dance with the authority, and we realize, okay, clearly we're not listening to each other. We're not going to be able to solve this one to the other. So by the time I come, or an individual comes and lodges this appeal with the tribunal, how long does it take then? And do you have a mandate to finish within a certain number of days?
We have a mandate to determine this dispute within 90 days, but that has not been largely possible since 2015. One of the reasons has been that when the tribunal came into force in 2015, the appointment of members then was under the National Treasury. And we've had instances where you are maybe half of the membership, and then we are supposed to be a 21-member tribunal. So sometimes you're operating at about 9 of you, and you have all this amount of disputes to be determined. And most of the disputes that end up before the tribunal are actually very heavy.
Okay.
Because some of them also involve international investors, foreign investors. So you find that you have disputes running into billions. That also require some of these taxpayers will bring the experts from outside. So the time frames overlap.
Okay.
And then under the Constitution, you understand that we have this alternative dispute resolution where the courts don't have to determine all disputes.
Yes.
So under our act, we also allow normally the taxpayers another 90 days. When you file the dispute, we'll ask you, do you want to go and engage again in another forum called ADR, alternative dispute
resolution,
where you now go, you have facilitators, you go and have a second bite at it. So you find that about 30% of those matters again are determined through that forum without necessarily having to come back to us. So because of that interplay between the ADR platform, the complexity of the disputes, we've not been able to determine them within 90 days. But now, like currently, we are now full membership. So we are trying to bring down our timelines to about 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on a minute. When you say bring down timelines to about 1 year, what does that mean? That it will take a year for a case to be determined?
Actually, it could take longer. At one time, I remember when I came in as chairman in 2020, I was still dealing with disputes of 2015. So, because of those, you see, in between 2015, like there's one time when we didn't have members for all year.
Okay. Because they had not been hired.
They had not been appointed.
Appointed, yes.
So even when we transited to the National Treasury, it also took a bit of time, about 6 months before they appointed 50% of the members, and then it took about 1 year to appoint another members. So you find those have also had impacts on the timelines. So what our purpose is then, like when I came in, then we cleared all the matters from 2015 to 2020. So currently we are targeting that by October, we should determine all disputes for the year 2021.
And how many?
Focus.
Okay, and how many members of the tribunal then would attend to a particular case? You mentioned that there are 21 members of the tribunal currently.
Yes.
How many would attend to a case that came before the tribunal?
We
sometimes have a 3-judge bench, 5.
We sit in panels of 5.
Okay.
The tribunal, what happens is that you have lawyers, you have economists, you have tax consultants, you have accountants. So when you have a panel, you have a panel that has a mix of professionals, so that if there's an accounting issue, for instance, in the dispute, then you have an accountant who can quickly be able to read the books and tell you this is the issue. If there's a legal issue, then there's a lawyer will be able to pick out the issue of interpretation. So it's a mix. A panel is composed of various professionals, so that then all aspects that may arise in the dispute are dealt with.
You know, the issue of going to court is something that very many people will want to shy away from. Whether you feel that you need to have a dispute resolved. So perhaps this online platform that you have perhaps makes things a little easier because you don't really actually have to physically travel somewhere. But beyond the discussion we are now having, what other efforts has the judiciary made to ensure that Kenyans actually understand that this is actually possible, that they have recourse, there is a way in which their matters can be resolved, especially with regards to tax, and that this is something that they can actually, probably sitting in the comfort of their homes, deal with without necessarily having to even perhaps look for a legal mind to help them, meaning a platform where they can actually ask, this is the problem. I would like to find a way of dealing with it. How best can I deal with it? Yes.
I think the judiciary has done well in terms of sensitization on the existing forums, where you can be able to access most of this information. You went to the website, you went to the available law court, through courts, they are there. You go to Huduma centers, they have some desks that will address most of your concerns. For the tribunal, we just transited from National Treasury to the judiciary recently. So we are also trying to come up now with a platform on which we can sensitize the public about the existence of the tribunal and how easily you can be able to access it. We've since formed a committee that then we want to do some outreach within the regions and tell people, hey, when you have a tax dispute, other than just dealing with the Kenya Revenue Authority, you have also another independent person who can look at the dispute and give you a fair determination. So we are also trying to roll out so that people get to know that we exist and that you have a recourse in the event you are.
You know, we work in radio.
Yes.
So what I'm about to say may sound like I'm campaigning to get business.
Yes.
But let me just say this.
Yes.
Even when I was in primary school, and I was in primary school in the 1960s, just so that you understand.
Yes.
That was the previous century. It was a really long time ago.
Yeah, that's a long time, yes.
But there's something that used to happen which I found fascinating even then.
Yes.
We had lessons on radio.
Yes, you even attended classes on radio.
Radio, meaning I was in class, there was a speaker.
Yes.
The radio was actually in the headmaster's office, but there were lessons that we learnt.
Yes.
I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
If the judiciary wishes to actually inform people beyond the physical presence, there's always an avenue through which, even if it's vernacular radio, because vernacular radio would get the message in a language that people can actually understand.
Yes.
And if it's something that they can consistently know that at this time, we are going to be educated about this particular thing. This transfer of knowledge that we're speaking of, and this awareness, because that's what awareness is.
Yes.
It will take place in a language people can understand, in a manner that is easily accessible and easily recordable, so that even if you are not present, somebody records it, you can listen to it later, so that they're actually informed about this. And there's a guarantee that information continues. So it becomes more or less like a continuous education mechanism.
If I can jump onto that as per the why, as I have heard you talk about what the tribunal does, and even with the many cases that you have and almost a backlog situation, I am sure that the majority of people, excuse me, who have taken or gone into payment with the authority over something that could have been settled by the tribunal have not. They've not come to the tribunal because of two things. Number one, they do not know that recourse mechanism exists.
Yes.
And number two, for fear of being crippled by the authority, they go ahead and pay something which honestly could have been resolved otherwise by the tribunal. So they're not aware that this mechanism for resource exists.
I agree with you to an extent, but in terms of the judiciary, in terms of their existence and their available forums, they have done well. I practice ordinarily in Mombasa, and I know I've had many judicial officers on the local radio stations, like you talk about what the judiciary is doing in respect of certain activities. For the purpose of the tribunal, we've also had a few public forums where we'll be invited. We'll attend some of the KRA functions where we'll also talk about the tribunal. What has happened is that we've not done much, but that is also largely based on budgetary constraints. So that unless you have an occasion like this, where you have now invited and you're able to talk about it, or you have a radio station inviting you, or an occasion you can take advantage of, we are moving now in a situation where we're going to be very deliberate and provide some budgetary allocation for purposes of sensitization and awareness, public awareness. That's in the pipeline. And even for us as a tribunal, that we have purposed to put it in our budget in terms of public awareness and those forums. So in terms of existence of the tribunal, it's just unfortunate that sometimes people don't read all the context. But when you look at most of the letters from the Revenue Authority, the last decision, they always tell you can refer to the tribunal. So they always give you, as a taxpayer, only that sometimes people are not sure whether the tribunal is part of KRA, an extension of the Revenue Authority.
Yeah, kind of like telling you, if you have a problem,
arbiter.
If you have a problem with us, come back to us to discuss it.
That's where the problem has been. Some people have had that fear that the tribunal is just an extension of the Revenue Authority, based on the historical fact that before they were what you used to call local committees that dealt with the disputes when you are dissatisfied, which were within the Revenue Authority itself. So we need to move a step further in terms of public awareness. That we are very deliberate and we intend to do that, so that at least the taxpayer is aware that he has an independent ear. Yes,
it's a discussion, by the way, we've had KRA officials here.
Yes,
and we have made those suggestions that beyond these forums where you physically go to discuss these things,
yes,
you can use an existing platform to educate people about these things on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's true.
So that when you have these forums that you go to, you're actually talking to people who are already informed.
Yes. So you engage more there.
You engage far better, because
they're elementary issues.
Yes, they're not being introduced to these matters for the first time. These are things they've probably even had discussions about in their own forums. So when they come to that meeting, it's a much better enriched discussion, because you actually get feedback from people who are already informed.
Even disabuse them on some misconception.
Yes.
That I agree with you.
Yes.
So disabusing on conceptions, and this is one of the things I think you've alluded to, that we are dealing with two institutions that are government. However you want to look at it. The judiciary,
yes.
The judiciary as an arm of government,
yes.
The tax authority as an executor of government.
Yes.
So now here is the lowly person who is coming in to this and is asking the tribunal, which is an arm of the judiciary,
yes,
to adjudicate over a matter with its cousin, the authority. So what is considered when these cases are brought before the tribunal? I'm sure you can understand now the trepidation with which an individual comes before the tribunal thinking, well, I'm already skinned because cousin, I'm talking to
close relatives.
Yes. Where do I sit in? So what is taken into consideration during these case hearings?
That I understand the natural fear, but once you're able to understand the role that an institution plays and come to terms with the fact that you're coming to the tribunal because you have faith and confidence that this tribunal will be able to adjudicate and make a fair determination, then it will be very easy for you as a taxpayer. And what has happened is that the beauty about it is that our decisions of the tribunal are reported. If today somebody wants to know what the tribunal said last week, we publish our decisions on the Kenya Law Report. So based on that, somebody having a fear, or if you have a dispute, then you can look at the previous decision the tribunal has made, and you can then have faith and confidence based on those decisions that actually they have even ruled in some decisions that look to be very heavy against the Revenue Authority, and the Revenue Authority has also been able to recover where they ought to recover. But you see, the bottom line being that we are all being guided by the law. What does the law say? Is that tax payable as per the parameters set by the law? So even you, as you're coming because the law is on your side.
Okay.
So if the law is on your side, you should not have any reservations on whether that dispute to be appropriately travelled. Because one is that you can also still escalate it from the tribunal to the High Court, to the Court of Appeal. You have various forums to be able to vindicate your interests.
You know, one of the things that I found amazing about the power of the media, is when it was demonstrated over time that individuals ascended to high political office and their previous jobs had been in the media. Now, it points to, one, somewhere along the line in the course of their normal duties, people trusted them. So when they presented themselves for these positions at whatever level of our political totem pole, the public felt they can be given that say-so, because it's like they represent something that the public resonates with.
Yes, they have been able to speak consistently.
Yes,
now have heard them.
Imagine if, say, the judiciary had Judge so and so, you give any name, who you know every Wednesday comes to talk about this, okay?
Yeah.
And the opportunity to even call in exists.
Yes.
Even if that is not the name of the judge. But
Yes.
suddenly, this whole judicial process with its diversity suddenly becomes alive. And why am I saying this? Because not everyone in this country will have an online platform where they can communicate. But radio, almost everybody in this country has access to.
That's true.
Literally.
Yeah, literally, that's true.
And it's something people listen to in a way that you need to see it to understand and believe.
Yes.
Now, I'm not trying to flog a dead horse. I'm simply trying to say that we have existing platforms through which the communication that we want to put across can be put.
Yes.
And it is fairly cost effective.
Yeah, that's agreed.
Yes.
Quite a reach.
Yes.
People
And so the end result is that the work that you do, adjudicating a matter with regards to individuals who are informed is a lot easier.
Yeah, much easier, yes.
Than with
much
people
easier.
Who are not well informed.
Yes.
Now, let me ask the question.
Yes.
Even as we look at the judiciary and what it seeks to do, and by the way, the judiciary, like KRA, have improved. I am amazed at the things that the judiciary has done. Are we likely to see these changes in the near future?
I think the changes have started. The mere fact that I'm even here to talk about the tribunal is better testament that actually we have come a long way, and we are very focused in ensuring that our consumers of judicial services are aware of their existence, our mandate, and how to access us. I'm sure that I don't want to speak to the policy makers, but from where I sit, I think there are very deliberate efforts, very deliberate and committed efforts to ensure that access to justice is a fact that every Kenyan should appreciate, and that we make access to justice much easier, and that people are well informed. The more informed they are, because you see where the judiciary sits is that we are arbitrating over disputes between parties and parties against the state. So where we sit as neutral arbiters, it's very important that the Kenyan develops that confidence that actually we can perform our vital role. And that I'm sure the judiciary is very committed to getting that level.